When love activates the survival brain, complex PTSD in intimate relationships, it begins with something small, a delayed text message, a change in tone, a partner needing space. For most people, this will register as inconvenience, but not a big deal. But for the survivors of complex traumatic stress disorder, it can register as abandonment, danger, or emotional annihilation. The heart rate accelerates, the stomach tightens, and the nervous system mobilizes, not because the partner is unsafe, but because the intimacy itself has become neurologically associated with threat. This is the paradox of someone that suffers from complex PTSD. The very thing the survivor longs for is closeness, is the very thing their nervous system has been trained to fear. My name is Fawzia Faizi Shah, licensed clinical social worker. Complex PTSD develops in conditions of chronic, interpersonal, traumatic experiences, such as physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and neglect, particularly when harm occurs frequently over a long period of time within attachment relationships, such as with the caregivers, family members, or trusted adults, individuals. The psychiatrist Judith Hearn identified that prolonged trauma fundamentally alters three core systems: the affect regulation, the self-identity, and interpersonal functioning. Intimate relationships directly activate all three because intimacy is not just emotional, it's neurobiological. It involves attachment, circulatory oxytocin release, autonomic nervous system, synchronization, and emotional vulnerability. But trauma reorganizes these systems around survival. It is physically embedded in the nervous system, which means that intimate relationships do not simply involve love. They involve the nervous system exposure. Complex PTSD shapes intimate relationships through predictable neuropsychological mechanisms. These responses are not character flaws. They're actually trauma-encoded adaptations. Number one is the hyperactivation of the attachment threat system. Intimate relationships activate the attachment system, the brain's biological mechanism for maintaining emotional bonds. In complex PTSD survivors, this becomes hypersensitive. The amygdala, responsible for the threat detection, becomes hyperreactive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotional regulation and contextual reasoning, becomes less effective under stress. This creates the attachment hyperactivation. Small relational disruptions can trigger disproportionate emotional responses, including fear of abandonment, emotional flooding, panic-like physiological state, urgent reassurance seeking. This is not emotional immaturity. It is actually the autonomic nervous system activation. The body is responding to perceived attachment threat. Number two is the emotional flashbacks and trauma time collapse. Unlike the traditional PTSD, complex PTSD often involves emotional flashbacks than verbal ones. These flashbacks involve sudden activation of emotional states associated with past trauma, shame, terror, worthlessness, helplessness. There are no images, only overwhelming emotional reality. Psychotherapist Pete Walker described emotional flashbacks as regression into the emotional state, earlier trauma without conscious awareness of their origin. In intimate relationships, these can cause survivors to react to the present-day partners as if they were past perpetrators, not intentionally, but neurologically. The nervous system cannot distinguish past from present when activated. And number third is the dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system. Complex PTSD disrupts the autonomic nervous system's ability to maintain equilibrium. Survivors may oscillate between hyperarousal, anxiety, irritability, emotional reactivity, hypervigilance, hyperarousal, emotional numbness, withdrawal, disassociation, shutting down. And this fluctuates between the autonomic system. But intentionally, the survivor's nervous system is attempting to regulate overwhelming emotional stimuli. And number 4 is the fear of vulnerability and defensive relational strategies. Intimacy requires vulnerability, but vulnerability was historically paired with harm, which creates defensive relational adaptations, including emotional distancing, avoidance of closeness, difficulty trusting, testing partners' loyalty. These behaviors function as protective mechanisms, not rejection. The nervous system prioritizes survival over connection because the connection was once unsafe. And number 5 is the disturbance in self-concept and relational worthy. Complex PTSD alters the survivor's internal working model of the self. Survivors often carry deeply embedded beliefs such as, I'm unlovable, I am too much, I will be abandoned. These beliefs are not cognitive distortions alone. They are trauma-encoded identity structures formed through repeated relational harms. These beliefs influence behavior in relationships, often leading to over-accommodation, fear of expressing needs, acceptance of unhealthy dynamics, difficulty receiving love, because receiving love contradicts the nervous system's internal model. Number 6 is the core regulation disruption. Healthy, intimate relationships involve co-regulation, the mutual stabilization of the nervous systems. But trauma disrupts the capacity to receive co-regulation. Survivors may misinterpret safety as unfamiliar and unfamiliar as unsafe. Here's the truth that trauma survivors rarely hear. Their reactions are not signs of weaknesses. They are signs of nervous system shaped by survival. Your brain adapted to protect you, not to sabotage you. And what was learned can also be unlearned. That's the good news, because the brain remains capable of neuroplastic change. Research shows that cognitive behavioral therapy, guided meditations, earthing, mindfulness, somatic experiencing, and attachment-focused therapy can resolve and restore nervous system regulation and relational safety. Healing does not require becoming someone completely new. It requires helping your nervous system learn a new prediction that intimacy can exist without danger, that closeness can coexist with safety, that love does not have to activate survival. When survivors develop self-awareness, emotional regulation, and safe relational experiences, the nervous system begins to recalibrate. Trust becomes possible. Safety becomes embodied, and intimacy becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a trigger, but a place of regulation, a place of repair, a place where the nervous system can finally stand down from survival and experience connection without fear. I hope that you liked this video, and if you did, subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. Leave a comment or two for me below. Thanks.